Hello, everyone. I have a lot of screens open. So I think I'm going to begin, and thank you for being here. And Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, God, who encourages us to be involved in deeds and words of Torah. I wanted to begin before we start with the text with a poem that does not have to do with the text, but that it is a time that we're together, Erev Tu B'Shvat. And so I am reading from a Tu B'Shvat Seder that the Masorti movement put together. We would have done it on Sunday if were none of the folks from the shul in Omer to have shown up, but we were grateful and lucky that they did show up. But it was in the back pocket of mine and of Rab Yos's for us to have something to do if we weren't able to do breakout groups. So those of you who are here on Sunday, thank you to Moshe for creating a relationship with our friends in Omer. Really excited to be able to have spent some time with them and to continue to spend time with them. So this is a poem by a young person. I can't tell if it's a boy or a girl, because in Israel now a lot of the names are just, gender inclusive. So the child's name is Zohar. I know that Nancy has a Zohar, but Nancy Zohar is a boy, and I know of girl Zohars too. No, a girl, right? I know of girl and boy Zohars. Okay. This is a child who is age 9 and lives on Kibbutz Nachal Oz. So I can send it to anyone in Hebrew if you'd like it, but I'll say it in English. One day I dreamt a dream, and in it I am sowing seeds of peace, seeds that will bring an end to war, seeds that will help end the conflict. I went out to the garden and began to think, how can I plant a tree that will cause us to love and to be more unified without conflicts and arguments? I will choose to plant this tree in each person's heart. Thus it will become the most precious tree. It will enable all of us to be great friends. Each of us will always helping others. A tree of peace, love, and unity that will stop anyone from feeling alone. That is by Zohar Malki, age 9, Nachal Oz.
Wow.
And
that's terrific for a 9-year-old.
Yeah. So
what does Zohar mean, please?
Like shining.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to say that we're starting this class today on a day where, if you read the Israeli or American newspapers, there was a lot of grim news.
Yeah.
And I know that that is emotionally affecting so many people here, including myself, that there was the tragic loss of 24 soldiers. I also want to tell you about an experience I had today. But first, just so I understand how much background to do, did anyone here see the video that Danielle Hartman did to introduce this? Okay, so if that's good. And so I prepared a summary of his video so for us to use as a conversation starter. It's a good video, but if you can, go see it another time, or if not, you can see the one with Rabbi Yonah Hain and Michal Biton, Dr. Michal Biton afterwards. So were any of you in downtown Princeton yesterday? So if you would have been in downtown Princeton Sunday night or Monday or today before, I guess, 10, there was graffiti on the library.
Oh,
When I think about the library in Princeton, I think of it as like the Beit HaMikdash of Princeton. The Holy of Holies of Princeton is its library, right? It's a place that people revere. And the graffiti, which has now been cleaned after a day and a half or so, said "Free Palestine." And I thought it was an interesting way to open this particular class because I can tell you that the name of this unit class is Antisemitism as a Divisive Force. And the divisive force is anti-Semitism as a divisive force among Jews. We're not talking about how non-Jews relate to us. That's a whole nother, PhD worth of learning. This is thinking about how in the last maybe 10 years, but certainly since 2015, 16, wonder what happened then. Thank you. We are, how did you find that, Edna?
I just Google it and there is a picture of the family.
Thank you. Thank you. So
there are 3 kids and the one that looks 9 years old, and it's about the family. They live now in Ashdod. We're talking about situation in Israel. They are one of the mefunim to evacuated to Ashdod.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just
No, it's I love that. I should have Googled him, but I read it in this Kubish Seder and I thought it was so meaningful anyway. Okay, so back to my disturbing moment of the day in Princeton, which made me think about what it means to think about anti-Semitism among Jews. So in the years 2016, 17, 18, 19 or so, there was a big debate in the Jewish community, both in Israel and in the United States, around who was an anti-Semite and was someone who criticized Israel anti-Semitic. It's actually not the same kind of debate that exists since October 7th. Some things have become clarified for folks, and some things have not. So when I heard and then saw the writing on the wall, what I knew about it is that there'd be some people, and I don't want you to identify it yourself, who would read Free Palestine as a deep expression of their own political views as a Jew. And there's some people here on our screen who would read Free Palestine as kill the Jews. On this very Zoom, having spent now enough time with most of you, I know there are people in our midst who believe both of those things. And then there are folks who may be frightened or confused about what has gone on in the world of anti-Semitism since October 7th. So I want to stop and have anyone say anything they need to say, and then I'm going to go through what the Hartman Institute believes is really important definitions to think about why political, and it's not in the reading, it's in the background reading, but not in the actual text, why anti-Semitism has for the Jewish people been one of our most unifying forces what was pulling us apart as a Jewish people in the last 5 or 10 years, both in the United States and Israel. And then think about a little bit where we might be now. But before we do that, if anyone has anything they want to say, either about the poem or about anything I just said, but not about how you're feeling about the situation in Israel, that we'll save for our later after hours conversation if anyone wants to stay. But if you want to say anything either about the poem or about the statement that I made that some people read the graffiti that I saw in the Princeton Library as "Killed the Jews," and some people read it as, yes, there should be a free Palestinian people in their own state. And some people might live in a body and soul that carries both of those sentiments in some way. So I'm going to stop and see if anyone wants to respond or say anything. Yeah, Mike. Mike and then Edna.
Well, it was a beautiful poem, or is a beautiful poem. That's what we want, but it says nothing about how we're going to get there.
Right, he's a child. Yeah.
Oh, I know, but I think it's a great start.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. It's a lovely prayer. Thank you. Edna.
I wanted shortly to comment about the Free Palestine and these kind of posters and shouting and demonstration. As a result of October 7th, what crossed my mind is not so much being torn about the Jewish interpretation, whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it is anti-Israel or whatever, but to try really to get an intelligent or coherent grasp, what do the people who are holding it mean? And it follows also this morning, there was a big article on TV where Noah Tishby, she became famous also in United States. She's doing a lot of hasbara, explanation about the war, was in Harvard and in other conference, and she was asking people, and it's not new, right? She was asking people, what do you mean? And the sea was the Black Sea and the Red Sea and the river, and also personally, I saw it in Washington, people saying all kinds of things, and I don't want to call them ignorant, but it sounds something that it's cool to hold and to shout. And what drives me crazy is to understand what brings this crowd to hold it with so much pathos and in, you know, the ways they do it.
Yeah, yes. Right. What is their underlying motivation? The people who come, how are they there? What do they intend?
And they admit that they know nothing about the kidnaps. They know nothing about, some of them said Hamas, it's not in Gaza, whatever. I won't repeat.
Yeah.
But, you know, it sounds like as if it's cool to be, to shout it from the sea to the river, whatever.
From the river to the sea, right. And at the same time, there are people who do know what it means and who use it, who are Jews who use it as an expression of their moral values, that they think there should be a Palestinian state. Most Palestinians who use that phrase use it to mean there should be a Palestinian state where the Jewish state is, and there shouldn't be a Jewish state. Not most Palestinians, Hamas. Many Palestinians believe that there could be, you know, Jews and Palestinians living together. Some Israelis believe that. No Hamas believes that. Hamas doesn't want a two-state solution. They want no Jews, right? Ellen.
So my thought is that anyone who would deface a building like the public library is someone who means destroy Israel. I think that someone who believes in a two-state solution to free, you know, give the Palestinians, I don't know. My gut feeling is that they wouldn't deface the public library.
Right,
So
of
I
all
think
places, the public library, right?
Yeah, defacing the library is, to me, is an extreme action. And I feel like anyone who would do that, they're talking about destroying Israel.
Okay. So we're going to go to Danielle's lecture, is there anyone else with a hand raised that I don't see? Okay. So we want to think about the terms pluralism, tolerance, and he uses the term deviance. There's an article in the background reading, which you probably didn't have time to read because you got it late. So this is basically what he's saying. Jewish peoplehood, which is what we've been discussing, requires a sense of tolerance for many issues over which we disagree. I think we can all agree on that in order to be consider yourself part of the Jewish people and part of Klal Yisrael and Am Yisrael, you will necessarily disagree with other Jews on major issues. Is everyone cool with that? Right. Many Jews accept that there are multiple ways to live legitimate and meaningful Jewish lives, and that Jews have a right to choose how to live their life in accordance with their own religious convictions, even if they're different from my own. We all agree with that. I think where we see a difference is in the state of Israel that mandates one specific kind of Jewish religious life. Okay. Pluralism. How many people consider yourself don't answer this, it's too hard a question. I was going to say consider yourself a pluralist, but it depends on what issues. Pluralism is for difference when we perceive the differences as being of equal or almost equal value to our own. Right? We can be pluralists when we consider the other person's position okay, authentic, good enough, not hurtful to someone else. And I think everyone here would be in that category on religious observance. I can observe one way, you can observe one way. Doesn't hurt me if you don't do the way I do, doesn't hurt you if I don't do the way you do. That's real pluralism. And also, I think that your way and you think that my way could be equally valid for a Jew, right? There's another way to look at life in the Jewish community and peoplehood, and that is tolerance. What do you think makes tolerance different from pluralism? Yeah, Moshe.
You make a value judgment on the other person's belief.
Yeah, it's an attitude to certain differences where we believe it's wrong or inferior to our own, right? Lots of us have those. I'll give you an example of mine. I used to be a religious pluralist on issues of women's obligation in Jewish law. Seriously, most of my life I used to say, yeah, I understand you can accept women in the minyan. I can accept that women don't count in the minyan, vice versa, actually. And I get that I'm a pluralist. They could all be valid views. I actually I'm sharing with you, I don't personally think that anymore. I am tolerant of Orthodox Jews now who believe that women don't count in a minyan, but I think they're wrong. I think women are equal and should have equal ability and equal obligation, right? So that's where I could be a pluralist on those issues. Many people are, and I am not at this point anymore. I'm just tolerant of those views. Now, me thinking that has no real effect on Jewish peoplehood, on anyone's safety, on anyone's life, on anything. It's just what I think. And you can think something different, right? There's another category that Danielle Hartman talks about, and that is deviance. When something is just intolerable and unacceptable and perceived as harmful and dangerous, right? So one of his arguments is that in the United States, specifically, we've all been taught to really be religious pluralists and to accept religious difference. What we haven't been taught, where we can't really apply that, is when the difference creates real moral difficulty for us. And so I want to give you an example that is less hot than anything in Israel, but really hot here. An example of that is one of the ways that our country has become much more partisan. I think there might be an election going on somewhere tonight, right? One of the states to the north of us. And the views, let's say on choice, are intolerable to the other side and are literally life and death to the other side. They do affect people's lives and well-being. Does that seem to jive with people? So we are in a world where we are able to understand religious difference and live with it, because in the end, it's not affecting people's lives in the same way as political difference, both in the United States and in Israel. And in Israel, the political differences may have come at the real desire to keep the Jewish people safe morally and to keep the Jewish people safe spiritually and to keep the Jewish people safe physically. So that the debates there are harder than any religious debate we have. So go now back to anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism used to be, in the world of the Jewish people, the thing that held us together, right? Post-Shoah, post-Holocaust, you heard never again. The creation of the state of Israel, we all are, not we, our parents understood that this was about building a miklat. And they understood that we needed a place to be because there was such severe anti-Semitism in the world. I would venture that for any of you who have children on this Zoom, I am not one of them, but any of you who have children, your children did not grow up with anti-Semitism as a ever-present force in their life. That may be changing. And what changed in around 2014, 15, 16 is that the Jewish people started to debate who is an anti-Semite based on, are they the far left of our country's political spectrum or the far right of our political spectrum? So instead of anti-Semitism being the force that draws us together, it became the force that drew us apart. I think that has changed a little bit since 9/11, but not so much. Not 9/11, October 7th. I always make that mistake. It's terrible. So I want to go on and have the conversation a little bit about anti-Semitism. I want to first stop and have anyone say anything they want, and then I'm going to go to the text that they've given us. They don't really deal with such an expression of anti-Semitism, but they're good texts. Yes, Moshe.
You have to define what miklat is for people who don't know Hebrew.
I'm so sorry. Would you like to? I can.
No, it's fine. I'm not the rabbi.
But you are Dover Ivrit. It's a miklat is a shelter. I'm so sorry if I forget to do that. A shelter. So it was thought of that the creation of the state of Israel would be the shelter for Jews worldwide who were in danger from anti-Semitism. And at that time, it was and has been since then. We know that French Jews en masse have been going in rapid numbers in the past years. Anyone have something they want to argue with or say or are unclear?
just a comment, because
Yeah.
everything takes me to current affair. I like so much the distinction and the talking about the how to pronounce it, the DVINCE.
Divisive force. Divisive?
No, divide. He has a pluralism, tolerance, and
Deviance.
Deviance.
Okay, because it takes me to the letters of many presidents of universities, that maybe they could use that to justify and to make their letter sharper and more decisive and more to the point. So this is like a comment, because
It's
I think instead of being or a pluralistic or tolerant to both sides, you know, both sides are just in their demands, you know, this
Yeah.
is we have a lot of room to use this category.
right. So I will say that
Without being ashamed intellectually or morally, the
right.
opposite.
So if you printed out the stuff, like I'm not so sure that that the Talmud that he gave us, I think it's lovely and we can do a little bit with it, but the brilliance of this packet is his reading pluralism, tolerance, and deviance, the boundaries of Judaism, right?
Yeah.
It is his beautiful, beautiful piece. So I thought that, I mean, it's interesting. I wanted to only 2 of the texts because they're beautiful, 1 and 4, and then go to Danielle's ideas of tolerance, pluralism, tolerance, and deviance. So this is a beautiful piece of Talmud. It is very, very well known and very taught. My dog wants to read it, I think. She's barking. Who would like to read text 1 from the Babylonian Talmud, Masachet Eruvin, in English? Rabbi Abba. Thanks, Eleni.
Okay, Rabbi Abba stated in the name of Shmuel, for 3 years there was a dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, the former asserting the halakha is in agreement with our views, and the latter contending the halakha is in agreement with our views. Then a bat kol,
So why don't you translate Bat Kol, or I can? We'll do that.
it's a heavenly voice,
Yeah,
literally
nice.
the daughter of a voice, but a heavenly voice issued announcing the utterances of both are, are the words of the living God, but the halakha is in agreement with the rulings of Beit Hillel.
And we're going to go and do more with this, but this is the piece of Talmud that anyone having an argument with someone else in Judaism should know, because this is it. I mean, it's so beautiful. And we got to do the Hebrew on this. What was the Yatsa bat kol ve'amra elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These and these are positions of the living God. Even the way it's written, it's not just Elohim, it's Elohim Chaim, the living God. And then it continues. The halakha. Can you read the rest? Tani, you're fine.
Sure. But the halakha is in agreement with the rulings of Beit Hillel. Since, however, both are the words of the living God, what was it that entitled Beit Hillel to have the halakha fixed in agreement with their rulings? Because they were kindly and modest. They studied their own rulings and those of Beit Shammai, and were even so humble as to mention the actions of Beit Shammai before theirs.
Okay. Someone want to unpack what this means to you?
Well, I can say.
Yeah.
That Beit Hillel, you notice in the Talmud, whenever the machloket, the discussion, the disagreements are reviewed or shared, Beit Hillel will always say first, what the Beit Shammai position is before saying what their own Beit Hillel position is. It's pretty standard, I think, in Talmud.
Very standard, and teaches us this idea that Danielle Hartman is teaching, that look, both of these positions can be right. This is when pluralism can be, when both of the positions are right. You happen to go by one of them.
Could I add something also, Rabbi?
Please.
And it also makes that position visible. It doesn't cancel it or omit it or hide it. It's not afraid. The redactors of the Talmud, the editors, put out the Shammai position. So it's respected as a position.
Yeah, and beautiful. And that is clearly something that we have a lot of trouble doing in both American and Israeli politics. Yeah. Mindy and then Jane.
It seems to me that by stating the position of the person that you ultimately oppose, it shows that you try to understand their position, not just oppose it because you don't like that person or you just know they're going to say something bad. It shows that you really are listening to what they have to say.
I hope so. Although I had this thought that I have never had before, just when both of you were talking, that maybe at one point Beit Hillel knew their position was going to be accepted, so they had the luxury of being able to present the position of the other. What do you think?
Is there ever a time in the Talmud when Shammai is taken
Yeah.
over Hillel? There is.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
don't know.
But most of the time. But yeah, Eleni.
Oh, let Judy go first because she hasn't spoken yet.
I just had a question.
Oh, Jane, and then Judy. Sorry.
Oh,
Jane.
Oh, I thought you were just calling me Judy.
No.
No, Judy Shapiro had her hand up.
Oh, so where is the proof that that Beit Hillel accepted Beit Shammai and was humble?
Well, there's not proof. They're just telling you that. They don't need to give you proof.
Okay.
The
Because
Gemara.
everything in this, if you take this
That-
part in
that is the Gemara is the proof. They don't need to prove it.
okay.
The rest of the Talmud is the evidence
Right.
That-
They're
statement.
Judy.
I just had a question. I don't know why this hit me, but is this kind of the basis for why on the Committee of Standards and Practices, or whatever that committee is called, there's a majority opinion and a minority opinion, and people can follow either?
Yeah. Well, so it's the Committee of Jewish Law and Standards of the Conservative Movement, the Rabbinical Assembly, and the way that it decides Jewish law is that there are majority opinions and minority opinions, and individual rabbis choose the way, if they're going one way or the other, which means that you can do something, but you don't have to do something, which meant, Kilo, a good example is when, I don't know, when did the Jewish Center become egalitarian? Except women into the minyan.
I think it was in the 80s.
I think Ruth Schulman was a key person. Some folks here might know when that happened.
No, it was before the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the 80s.
Okay.
I mean, we did a discussion of this. I prepared a talk when we had one of the earlier anniversaries about how religious practices changed here in the Jewish Center over time, and talked about how we, before my time here, accepted the idea of having a bat mitzvah on a Shabbat morning, not on a Friday night, which is what most conservative synagogues were doing at the time.
Right. So now I will tell you that the synagogue in East Brunswick still has a non-egalitarian minyan.
Mhm.
The Conservative Synagogue in East Brunswick has a minyan that still does not accept women. And I think in Highland Park as well.
I thought so, yeah.
Now they are in the minority. So it's both of those positions are accepted by the law committee, Judy, and each community with their rabbis decide how they want to go. Yeah. Is this the basis? Yeah, yeah, and that's where I would say that, you know, when Danielle talks about pluralism versus tolerance, there was a point in my life, my personal own religious development, where I stopped being a pluralist, where I stopped thinking that not counting in a woman in a minyan was anything but misogyny or historical misogyny. And I know that lots of Jews believe differently. It's okay. Okay, anyone else love this piece of Torah as much as I do? Yes, Sally?
What I like is the idea of respecting the opposite opinion. Difficult to do, speaking personally as well as politically, but I like the fact that that's considered very important.
Right. So I love that as well. And you hear that from the Bat Kol, from heaven itself is saying they're both okay. You know, you have two of the greatest rabbis here. What happens when one of those opinions is not okay? That's what gets it interesting. Yeah, Mike?
Well, when you hear both sides of an argument and unlearned people, there are things that come from both that would help solve the problem.
What do you mean? Explain that more. I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, well, they may bring out certain things that one person didn't think of that is useful. So,
Okay, so even if I disagree with someone, I may learn something from them.
exactly.
Yeah, okay, I take that. And I think that that's really important. Yeah. So we're going to skip 2 and 3. We're going to go just do a little of 4 because I'd like to actually talk about anti-Semitism for a little, or have you talk about it. So, hey, Moshe, would you read for us the Maimonides, the question?
I don't see the text.
Page 169.
I don't see the text on my screen.
It's in the chat. It's okay. Someone
Oh.
else will read it. It's
Yeah,
someone else.
that's fine. Let somebody else
Who
read.
would like to read?
I'll read.
Thanks, Jane.
How should rabbinites behave toward Karaites concerning the circumcision of their sons, inquiring after them, going to their homes, drinking their wine, and all other matters?
Okay, so what's the question here? Such an interesting question and should help us today. So we have the Rabbanim, the rabbinic Jews, and you have the Karaim, the Karaites. Karaites, they don't believe what the rest of the Jewish people believe. They believe in just Torah Judaism, but not in what happens after with the rabbis. And so the question now in Maimonides, in the Middle Ages, is how do you act towards them? Do you count them as Jews or not? How do you behave towards them? Quite an interesting question. Who wants to answer? Jane, you want to continue?
Sure. Indeed, dear honored fellow, judgment and wisdom are the main concern, and I understand from your question that you are a man of high virtue, piously mindful of complying with God's will, seeking to delve into the depths of the laws incumbent on God-fearing men. And I will answer your question as we have been shown from heaven in the greatness of his glory. The Karaites living here in Alexandria and in the land of Egypt and in Damascus and in other places in Muslim lands and elsewhere are worthy of respect. We
So
should
that's the first thing.
Worthy
They
of respect.
worthy of respect. They don't practice how we practice. In fact, I'm not sure our sons and daughters would marry each other, but they are worthy of respect. Number one. Okay.
We should approach them honestly and show decency when conducting our affairs with them, abiding by the ways of truth and peace, as long as they too behave toward us in good faith, and put away a dissembling mouth and perverse lips, refraining from slandering the rabbinic sages of this generation. All the more so they should forego mockery and ridicule in considering the words of our holy sages, the Tanaim of blessed memory, rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud, whose words and rulings, as ordained by them, by Moses, and by God, we obey. We are therefore commanded to respect Karaites and inquire after them, even at their homes, to circumcise their sons, even on the Sabbath.
Meaning
Very-
go and work on Shabbat. It's the only thing you can only thing you can cut on Shabbat, right? Is a foreskin.
To bury
So-
their dead and to comfort their mourners. Evidence for this can be learned from Gittin 61a. We wish Gentiles a good harvest in the fallow year, and we inquire after them for the sake of peace. Mipnei darkei shalom.
So
We
now
learn-
these people, Karaites, consider themselves Jewish. Most rabbinic Jews don't consider them Jews. But listen how they answer to this. We learn one does not go to the house of a Gentile on the day of his misfortune. And when meeting a Gentile at the market, one greets him briefly and gravely. We infer from this that visiting a Gentile and inquiring after him on his holiday is allowed. Many stories in the Talmud point this out. And if this is so concerning idolaters like the Christians, it's even more so concerning those who repudiate all the laws of the Gentiles and acknowledge the one God, that we are not to be allowed to inquire after them even at their homes. Really, that even we have fundamental difference within this is fundamental difference in how Judaism is practiced, and we're still supposed to be with one another. We're still supposed to inquire after one another. I think that one of the things that was happening in this congregation and across the country in the not recently, but in the decade before this, is that people on either side of the American political debate and the Israeli political debate were seeing the position of the other, not with eyes of pluralism, not with eyes of tolerance, but with eyes as something that's deviant. That is to say, people on the right of American political life thought that the far right, that people on the far left were saying things that were dangerous, and vice versa. That got us into trouble in the United States in the election of 2016 as a community. I don't know if you remember this, and I fear that this does not happen again in this election, that Jews were calling each other anti-Semites on one side or the other. So far right-wing Jews would call Jews who were in coalition with progressives or who wanted a two-state solution in Israel, or who wanted progressive values in the United States, were being called anti-Semites by the far right. In the same way, or in a similar way, in our politics in the United States, some Jews of the left would say that Jews on the far right weren't behaving with Jewish values vis-a-vis either the state of Israel or how they voted in the United States. And then we got into a problem where there was anti-Semitism on both sides. Have you read Deborah Lipstat's latest book on anti-Semitism? So one of the great pieces in that work that I encourage you to buy it and read it, it's not that long, is she is able to uncover how the divisiveness on the right and the left started to create a divisiveness within Jewish communities. And whereas anti-Semitism used to bring us together, in recent times, it's been pulling us apart. And the questions remain from us that we have a challenge in maintaining a shared category of anti-Semitism in the Jewish community today. We hear what we think, or I think. There are differences in the assessment of existential threats. People on the right and people on the left think that existential threats to the Jewish people are different. Also, most of the people on this, everyone on this Zoom, doesn't consider themselves only a Jew. It's just one part of your identity. You vote in American politics for many different things. Partisan politics and the erosion of intelligent political discourse has led to a time of name calling and a time where it's hard for us to actually then be able to say, is there still anti-Semitism? And how do we see it on our own political side and call it out before we call it out on the side of the other? I don't know how that is sitting with any of you. I know that some of you are involved in politics, and I'd love to just pose that couple questions to you. One, have you felt how have you felt the increase in anti-Semitism? Have you?
You mean in general or in Jews to Jews?
No, in general.
Oh,
And then do you see this now as, do you see ways that we can call out our own political sides for their anti-Semitism? I'll tell you, I'll let you answer the question, but I've heard from both Republicans and Democrats have come to my office and said to me things like, I feel like the Democratic Party has lost me because there's so many anti-Israel people. And then I've had Republicans come in my office and say, I've been a Republican my whole life, but I think that there are kind of too many white supremacist anti-Semites in the party. How can I continue to vote for them? So I'm going to leave those two questions open for you. How have you felt an increase in anti-Semitism, A? And B, have you been able to see anti-Semitism in your own political lives, parties, and have you been able to confront that? Or is it just too hard? Yep, Debbie.
I'm quite involved politically. I am a Democratic committee person from Plainsboro. I serve on the Middlesex County Democratic Committee. I personally have not seen anything here in our community as anti-Semitic, and we're a very diverse community here. But that doesn't mean it isn't there somewhere. I don't know that we know everything that's going on in our community. I think it's very hard to know, but I think there's a question of ethics. We as Jews believe in ethical behavior, and there's certain things in the political spectrum, and I don't need to have to point them out, that are not ethical. They may not be anti-Semitic, but they're not ethical either.
I'm not, what do you mean?
I'm falsehoods of various sorts, accusing people of corruption when there is no corruption, just to score political points. There's all kinds of things going on. that I do know about. And I do a lot of political reading, and I do a lot of evaluating where I am. I think that you have to look at, I don't want to get into a real political discussion, but I will just say that President Biden was there in Israel right after October 7th, showing support for Israel and for the Jewish people. And I don't know what greater expression of support there could have been.
Can you just give me a few minutes? And I'm sorry. Oh God, I have one with me.
No one, anyone else want to jump in? Yeah, Eleni. And then Judy.
Well, I'm retired now from working at a university, but it's in the university that I see so much that's very concerning. I think I'll just leave it at that.
I get that, Eleni, for sure. And I don't have any relationship at all with Princeton University, with any department or any particular professors there. So I can't speak to that. You probably know much more than I do.
Well, I worked in New York City, so I'm more familiar with what's going on there, and just reading the newspaper, what's going on in many places across the country, many universities, and that's
no question, no question. There is a lot of anti-Semitism. Any college student who says that canard about from the river to the sea clearly doesn't know anything about geography, and somebody ought to ask themselves how they got into a prestigious university.
So I want to say that I have taught this class before. And your answers tonight are so different post October 7th. In that I feel like I'm hearing people say, or I heard people say before, that anti-Semitism was the anti-Semitism on each side was really pulling our people apart. That the right and the left and how they understood or saw anti-Semitism on the other side was something where we couldn't come together. And that it was a dividing force. Whereas anti-Semitism had always been in Jewish history what kept us together, not happily, but something that we shared. And I think that we have seen a change in the last 3 months. Yeah, Moshe, and then Arlene, and then Judy.
I respectfully disagree.
Okay.
I think that the atmosphere of anti-Semitism, whether we feel it we perceive it individually or it's a communal thing that the community thinks it's attacked, is actually bringing the community together.
Yes, we agree. We agree.
Yes.
That's what I was saying. We agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying we agree, Moshe.
Okay.
I'm saying that when I've taught this before, yeah, we agree.
Okay.
That the 10 years previous to October 7th, there was such divisiveness in the Jewish community that many thinkers in the Jewish community, Daniel Hartman being one, believed that it wasn't bringing us together anymore. And I think that in the last 3 months, that's changed. So Arlene.
You know, when you see Proud Boys marching on Nassau Street, which is purely an intimidation tactic, it's a little hard to see good people on both sides of it.
Right. Yes,
So,
and that's when we're not pluralists on that.
no, but we are targeted.
We are targeted and we consider them deviants. That's where his Danielle Hartman's argument comes in. We are no longer able to say that some political views are okay. That political view. we
But
wanna
then
say
but then they're given the privilege of free speech.
yes, everyone in our country is given the privilege of free speech. Yeah. That is a price yeah. What we have to clearly work for a little better is to make sure that folks on either of the polls don't get elected. The deviants don't get elected. Yeah.
You know, Nikki Haley can say from now until tomorrow that we don't have a racist country. But do we ever?
Yeah,
And-
I mean,
And pick any other that you want. I mean, we are the other, and there are so many others in this country.
I want to tell you about a story of something I did this week. I accompanied one of our congregants, Alexandra, to the mosque it's on Old Trenton Road, the Muslim Center of Greater Princeton. And I saw Moshe right before I went, and it was hard to go because I am someone who wants to feel okay with everyone. And it was a night of interfaith teaching, and it was for teachers and educators. And of course, they treated us so beautifully. And of course, there was, I'm not saying of course, there was kosher food from ShopRite for all of us.
It's a beautiful place, and they've always treated our congregants with respect there.
With respect. And it was a beautiful evening, most of it.
But
And I felt like the other. And for the first, I'm someone who has grown up mostly in the bubble of the Jewish community. But I also listened to a lecture on from a university professor, young woman, smart, on the history of how Muslims came to the Americas through West African slavery. And I realized while listening to this professor that I had never learned that, ever. I had gone to good public schools and a really excellent private school, but I didn't know that Muslims were here from the time of slavery. This just wasn't taught. I don't know if it's taught now. Then I tried to think about, like, in general, who else are the others? Who else are the others who don't have their stories told? And I felt for them. And I also knew that they didn't know our stories. They're not learning those in public school either. Judy, did you want to add?
Just two things that that hit me. One, going back to Deborah Lipstadt, she always says that there is anti-Semitism on the left and on the right, and so but I think whichever side you're on, you may recognize that, but you think the other side's anti-Semitism is worse or more dangerous. But I think you were talking about Jews referencing other Jews, as anti-Semites. I think even more so than that, it's, well, you're a good Jew and you're a bad Jew, even more than, saying you're an anti-Semite. And well, listen, Trump tried to tell us that we were bad Jews if we didn't vote for him. But, I think that's dangerous dialogue. Who's the good Jew and who's the bad Jew? And maybe that is anti-Semitism, but it feels just a little bit different. And
Terribly divisive. You're right. Terribly divisive to the Jewish.
Terribly divisive.
I think that we're in a really quite interesting time, and I would love if you would all keep me abreast of what you're seeing in whatever town you live in, or if you see something in the newspaper about what's going on in terms that I don't see. I only heard about the about the Free Palestine because a congregant called me about it. And then from that, I was able to begin conversations with the city, with the mayor and with the police department about like what that means when someone sees that for over a day and a half. So I think we're counting on that. We're also counting on whatever political party you're part of. I assume we have people in both parties here that we're able to call out the anti-Semitism that we see in our own political parties as we begin a year of what's going to be a hard election in the United States. And an election where I think that the Jewish community is going to come up a lot, right? Somebody mentioned tonight how Biden, right? Debbie said Biden couldn't have done better for for Israel since October 7th. And we know that he will lose votes from the progressive left because of that.
Yes, yes.
So interesting for all of us how we're going to have to be out there. I want to stop. It's 8 and I want to invite, but before I turn this over to how you're feeling about the terrible events of the war, we know that there still is a war going on. So I have a soft announcement. Moshe, can I make that soft announcement?
Yes.
Would you like to?
No, it's fine. You're the rabbi.
No, but you're the organizer.
Yeah, but I'm tired. Okay. We are going to have a solidarity mission to Israel at during the first half of March. God willing, as they say, we'll have the program and everything by Friday announcements. I've been working on it for a while with our committee, or 2 people on our committee. And I've done a lot of trips to Israel, and I really think this is going to be outstanding. And I'm not saying it because I did it. I'm saying it because I've seen it develop on the other side. In other words, of people putting the trip together. So I hope, my great hope is that we get as many people as possible, because I think it's going to be successful in balancing, giving us an ability to give. That's why we're going on a solidarity mission. But I also think some of the things that we'll be doing and hearing from different speakers will give us information that's important to us intellectually. And of course, the emotional part. So I'm a big fan of the trip, and I hope you'll see it on Friday. It looks like it will be ready.
So we don't have details yet about price. I know people have asked us about price, as I've started to say. It will be whatever the base price is plus airfare, although maybe people can use miles. It's going to be a Saturday night departure back on Friday morning. So really a solidarity trip. Of course, you can get there early if you want, you can extend later if you want, and our tour provider can help you with those arrangements, or you can stay and see family. But we're really excited about being able to actually do volunteer work and spend some money in the Israeli economy, which we think is important as well, and hear from experts and mostly just say we are here in solidarity. So I want to close this part and say that I thank you all